Hello and welcome to episode 20 of Aico TV. I'm Alex Garmston.
And I'm Holly Moore.
And today we're celebrating our 20th episode of Aico TV. That means if you've tuned in from the start, you are very brave and you stayed with us, which is great. But you know, it's our 20th episode and we have an action-packed lineup for you as usual, and here's what's coming up. Firstly, we have RSP Fire Sprinkler Systems. This is part 1 of 2 with our RSM Dan Thomas.
Then we go to Signature Estates and Help Me Fix with our Regional Specification Manager Ben Malton.
Then we have Phil Murphy talking to our RSM Steve Bully.
And as always, we conclude with our FAQ.
For the first part of Aico TV today, we are joined by our Regional Specification Manager for Wales, Dan Thomas. He'll be talking to the family-based Caerphilly unit, RSP Fire Sprinkler Systems, talking about their relationship with Aico and what they've been up to over the last 12 months. Let's go over to Dan Thomas and hear what they discussed, talked about, and yeah, we'll catch up again soon.
Hi and welcome to Aico TV. Today we're joined by RSP of Caerphilly, and we're going to be talking about sprinkler systems, sprinkler legislation in Wales, amongst other things. So guys, if you'd like to introduce yourself, Dan, if you want to do a short intro.
Yeah, so I'm Dan Newman. I've been appointed CEO of RSP Fire Sprinkler Systems. I joined my father and my uncle that sits beside me to basically take RSP into the future. So I'm driving a team of successors basically to help us extend the shelf life of RSP, because we feel that together our sense of purpose, our innovation, and our scope for further growth is well within our grasp, thanks to the hard work that these guys have put in. So yeah, thank you for the invite today. Appreciate you being here.
It's great to see you guys here. Yeah.
I'm John Newman, joint owner and chairman of RSP Sprinkler Systems. I've been in the business for over 20 years now. Basically, I used to do what we call commercial systems, but now specialise in residential and domestic installations.
Hi, my name's Anthony Newman, John's brother, of course. Started the business probably about 13 years ago. Back in the early days, there was just myself and one other, and working from a small garage. And to where we are today. So John and I joined forces and became what we are today, RSP Fire Sprinklers.
So yeah, just had a sort of few questions to ask you guys really. So first of all, I mean obviously I know, but this is for the audience. Sprinkler legislation in Wales obviously came into force a few years back. So just if you wanted to give a little bit of a sort of run in as to what it is, what's required.
Yeah, sure. Basically, the legislation was brought in. I was originally proposed, I think it was around 2012, but it took quite a while to really kick in, so to speak. For several years, the Welsh Assembly ran pilot projects to see how it would work in installing into people's homes, care homes, high-rise, whatever. And it finally kicked in properly in December 2016. And what the legislation covers really is the installation of sprinkler systems to all residential and domestic new builds, possible conversions. So if you're converting a house into flats, for instance, or flats back into a house, that would be caught. Change of use from commercial to residential. So that's what the legislation covers. It's pretty much, I think it's the first of its type of legislation in the whole world, you know, in Wales. We're quite proud of that, really.
Very, very proud Welshmen we are as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's nice to have something that's a first for us, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, it was something I was made aware of, obviously, when I actually met you, Dan. I think it was met yourself when you came up, and we sort of talking about it, as I say, pre-2016, and I think it took a lot to get it into the minds of the new build sector. Just my personal experience of seeing it being pushed back. Well, plans are in, so you don't need to put the sprinkler in now. That kind of went on for a couple of years.
Well,
from memory.
the first developer that we worked with was Bellway. They were the first ones to have to install after 2016. A lot of the developers, if they got their applications into building control before December 16, they didn't have to put sprinklers in, even though they were building after that. So, but Bellway were the first ones who were caught. And they called me down to a meeting. We were in a situation where I came from a commercial sprinkler background. I had some experience in residential and domestic, but I didn't really understand the housing industry, if you like, and they didn't understand sprinklers. So we all sat around a table to try and figure out how we were going to go forward. What became very quickly evident to us was that if the sprinklers failed in any way, now when I say failed, it's the water supply. We have a big problem in Wales with water supply, not providing the right flows and the right pressures. And it's quite obvious talking to Bellway that if they built a property, we put a sprinkler system in, and then you come to test it with the water supply and it fails, they can't sell the property. They won't get it signed off by building control. So there's a lot of hurdles to get over. They couldn't be necessarily thinking about putting big storage tanks in the attic or in the gardens. Gardens are not that big nowadays on these new build houses. So we worked together, developed a system. We came up with this idea of an independent water main for sprinklers, which kind of has been used now pretty much throughout Wales and in some parts of England where they decided to put sprinklers in. A big learning process, really.
Yeah, it's a lot involved. It's a technical system that's going in as well. And as you say, the water pressure issue is a big one. A lot of pumps you see, and the irony of all these water tanks coming out of properties, and then all of a sudden we're putting water tanks back into some. It's just it's a bit nonsensical, really, isn't it?
Yeah, just to add a little bit from my perspective of the legislation as well. I joined the company just before the legislation came into place. But I was fortunate enough to meet Dan Jones on a few occasions, Assembly Minister who developed the legislation and helped put it in. It did get cross-party support, so a lot of political background because of the life safety element. Bit of resistance from the housing developers, which I kind of understand really when you look at economics and all these sort of regulation changes that have helped to make houses more fireproof, as it were. But with innovation come a lot of sort of unintended consequences as well, where the way that we live nowadays actually in some ways makes us a bit more susceptible to fire, incidents of fire. So less frequency, without a doubt, but still the intensity is there when it does happen. But what I'd like to sort of point out with the legislation is if the developers work with the right contractors and you've got that sort of collaborative culture, then it's a fantastic case study on that site in Bellway, because as John, my father there, just suggests, it was the first estate that was caught by the legislation, caught, so to speak, But when we collaborated and we had that sort of innovation of the radial main idea, that helped us to make sure that the sprinklers weren't just compliant, but they were concealed and they were cost effective. Now, the outcome of that is that we managed to avoid having to put pumps and tanks into each house. And also, to prove that it did work, and we always have faith that it will, there was a fire on that estate. One of the houses probably most remotely situated from the pump by the entrance of the whole place. I think the tenant put a tea light under a boiler. And it was a terraced house as well. So if you can imagine, if the fire brigade didn't get there in time and the sprinklers weren't there, where that could have ended up. Yeah. Could have been an explosion, could have been death. The fire brigade didn't quite turn up in time because they have like a 10-minute window, I believe. And it was a new build, they couldn't quite find it. But our one sprinkler head, which I've got on the table in front of me, not that specific one, but one like that, put the fire out instantly. Yeah. So, I mean, that particular site is so significant in so many ways. It really give us a platform of being a great contractor to work with, but also just really shows that the legislation, well, if it saves one life, then it's worthwhile. Absolutely, I totally agree. I'm not sure whether this snippet is actually correct. You please correct me, but I heard that in the US, where there was a sprinkler system fitted, there's been no fire deaths. I mean, probably not true, but I mean, obviously, it saves many lives, So. Well, it's important to reflect, though. I mean, we don't like to generalise or oversimplify the message because, it's very easy to say that perhaps no deaths have been attributed to any properties that are caught fire due to sprinklers, but without the data in hand, and we don't push the agenda, we don't sell sprinklers, we just provide them. We prefer to impart education and knowledge like you guys do. But I would definitely say that if sprinklers to go in, they're to go in by a certificated company that carry the competence, the experience, and use products like we see on the table there that have been properly approved and listed. Unfortunately, there will be a time, I'm sure, there'll be a fire in a property that's been sprinkler protected, but installed in a way that's substandard that could reflect badly on all of us. Yeah. So we're very much driving the necessity that our customers are well educated, well informed, and empowered to make the decision whether, if they don't come with RSP, that's fine, but go to a credible competitor that's going to protect us all. On the back end of that, it was 12 years ago when I set up the business, and it was apparent that there was no other company within Wales, the whole of Wales, that had the accreditation to fit these fire sprinklers. So
proudly, we were the first company within the whole of Wales to become third-party accredited to fit the product and to be able to sign it off. And it's good to see now that there's a lot of other companies coming up. Granted, there's a lot of competition out there for us, which is healthy competition, but it's good to see that a lot of these companies are coming up now and wanting to become third-party accredited. And we now know that you know, that we're going to keep out the cowboys then, if you like, and there's going to be people installing the product correctly then.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
well, it's same in obviously the alarm side of things. You know, it's quality alarms fitted to the correct British standards by a certified contractor. You know, it's the same sort of principle, isn't it? You know, the system is only as good as the installation that's taken place. So yeah, absolutely.
I think it demonstrates our commitment though to accreditation and competence, that we've actually worked with people who've become our competitors to help them get their third-party accreditation as well.
Absolutely.
We work quite closely with
Yes,
competitors,
yeah.
you know.
Excellent, excellent. Well, regards to the standard then, so BS 9251 is the actual British standard for sprinkler installation. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of the standards?
Yeah, the standard, it's actually under review at the moment. The 9251 2014 standard is fairly basic actually in a sense. When you look at you can tell just by looking at the thickness, the commercial standard was that thick, and the British standard for residential is that thick. You know, it's
Font size probably has a
yeah.
impact.
Yeah. I'm just demonstrating a point. You know, it's quite basic, but it's going through reviews at the moment, and there's a lot of useful things being brought into it. The American standard obviously is long going NFPA 13R and 13D, which is the residential and domestic. And there's a lot of things in there. What I find when I'm working with the British standard, there's so many things missing in it that I often refer back to the NFPA 13 to find little gaps. Things like
it's something we do with BS 589 Part 6. If it's not in Part 6, it's in Part 1. You know, so you refer to the commercial standard.
Right.
It makes sense. Yeah.
There's a bit of that, but that's going to get less and less. You know, the standard is getting better, and certainly the improvements I see coming in this year will get better as well. Monitoring, for instance, monitoring of valves.
Yes.
Make sure, you know, so if someone accidentally closes them, it'll send a signal off them and the like.
Yeah.
But yes, we design and install to the standard. In terms of maintenance and service, it recommends an annual service of sprinkler systems. It's not mandatory, but it recommends it. So yeah, we go to that standard.
Excellent, excellent. Like any British standard, they only move forward, they never go backwards, you know, so it's good, you know. Again, Part 6 changed a couple of years ago, where LD3 previous to that was, you know, just the hallways and landings for smoke alarms, and now it's LD2 for majority of properties, so it's only going to go forward, thankfully, you know, it's only going to improve to, again, save lives, you know.
It's interesting, you know, when you talk about LD1, 2 and 3 and alarms, we have very little to do with alarms. So it was one thing I was going to learn when I came up here today.
Oh, absolutely.
A bit more about the different standards that you guys work to, because I'm beginning to realise more and more it closely integrates with us.
There's a big crossover, absolutely. You know, they're both two separate systems, ultimately doing the right, trying to do the same thing, which is save lives. You know, and they both have British standards to be in the building together, so it's...
We made a decision early on to specialise in sprinklers. We weren't going to diversify and look into alarms and other passive products or whatever. We are looking at fire stopping simply because we do a lot of retrofits now, so we have to do our own fire stopping, so we intend going to Fire to get accreditation, but possibly not to make it available commercially, you know, for our own projects.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, just one reference out of 9251 that I just wanted to highlight, really. So section 5.13.3 is very exciting.
Multi-story, yeah.
So absolutely, it's a multi-story. So yeah, just a reference or 2 points in that. The first point in that zone systems or duplex flats then requiring an LD1 alarm system. So that's an alarm in every room in the property except for bathroom, shower rooms and toilets. What's the understanding behind that?
It's quite interesting and it's a little bit confusing really, because the situation with sprinklers is, yes, if we're looking at a high-rise, sorry, not a high-rise, multi-story, and that is literally anything 2 stories or more, it's not necessarily a high-rise block. What the standard says is that we have to put a zone valve which identifies the floor, We don't have to put signals to each flat, provided you've got an LD1 system in there. So that seems straightforward, but very often we do get fire strategy documents come through and say, no, you don't need to do the LD1 in the flats, for instance. It's LD2 or LD3 or whatever. And all we want are zones for the sprinklers. So, and as far as our certification, we can't insist otherwise, but what we would do is on the certificate of conformity, we would declare it either a minor non-conformity or a non-conformity to the standard, but it is acceptable to the HAs and the authorities have an adjudication over the property.
Excellent, excellent. And regards to the other part in that standard, in relation to where you have a sprinkler system, obviously with a flow switch on that system, integration into the alarm system. It says in there that you should, and good old word for should in a British standard, but you should either link it to an audible warning within the property and or the automatic fire detection system in there, be it part 1 or part 6. What's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, there's a part of the standard that also says that if the alternative detection, your side of the business if you like, if it provides adequate warning for to escape from the property in the event of a fire, then the sprinklers don't necessarily need to be connected to an alarm. And I have to say that in a lot of the new build housing estates, that's what's happening. We are obliged still to provide the flow switch so that if the resident or the housing association, whatever in the future they want to connect it to an alarm, they can. But there's no obligation for us to do that. But I have to say, where we do it, and it's very often with housing associations that we do it, and very often I'm finding they've got the Aico systems.
Yeah.
So it's very easy then to create the connection through your
absolutely.
radio system.
It's something that the housing associations and councils that I work with, Swansea Council is a prime example because we've met on site multiple times there. Yeah. But they will sort of push for that. If you RSLs in North Wales, they will push for that sprinkler integration. Just for speed of warning into the property. Yeah, the sprinkler's doing its job, fantastic, but just an extra alert. The way I sort of think of it in my own head is that if I had a sprinkler system in my house, it's going off in the kitchen in the middle of the night, but I'm getting an audible warning to say, get your backside out of the house, basically. So
of course, the reality is as well, and one of the reasons the standard does give that bit of a relaxation, is that it's always your side. It's the detection that will set off first.
Absolutely, yes. That's the irony.
It seems almost pointless to have an alarm from the sprinkler system, a minute later or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of talk about saving lives, and it's kind of fortunate for our industry. There's a lot said for sprinklers saving lives, but it's the alarms actually that probably do more to save the life than the sprinklers, because if the alarm detection goes off and they hear it and they get out of the property, then their lives are saved. What our sprinklers do then, obviously, is deal with the fire and put it out.
Dealing with fire, protecting the property
and
as well as...
And stops it spreading to others as well.
Absolutely. As you were saying before, the time it takes for a fire brigade to get to that property. I remember a property we did up in near Mistake, actually, and if it's going to take the fire brigade 10, 20 minutes to get to that property because of the ruralness of that area, you do want something doing the job for you in the first instance, and fingers crossed again, saving the life and protecting the property. So,
yeah. What I will say as well with the sprinklers, I mean, other than these amazing enhancements we can put on it with Aico, it's relatively free of any fancy technology. I mean, can I just read through the sprinkler?
Please do. Yeah.
I mean, you've got the sprinkler head there.
It's a nice mechanical system, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's nothing really. There's nothing to be wired up. There's no electronics other than the alarm system. Should we connect it up? But basically, you've just got a mechanical. There's a fusible link there on the sprinkler, and I mean, this is tucked up in the ceiling, and you've got a white cover plate, which is this here. Sorry, you've got the cover plate there. Okay, so basically, all you're seeing there is that against the ceiling. And tucked behind that, then you've got the sprinkler head. Now it's 68 degrees. Well, at a few degrees less, actually, the cover plate will drop off, just fall, because that's just purely decorative. And then the deflector will drop down, and you've got a fusible link, that'll release, which releases a valve and allows the water to flow. So basically, I mean, it's absolutely free of any sort of fancy technology then, if you like. Although that would have been fancy technology going back in its day.
Absolutely.
But there's no electronics, you know, so it's pretty much fail-safe, to be fair.
Yeah.
You know.
I do like the principle of it. It's so simple, and it's not simple to install, I'm sure, but you know the principle of how it operates. The actual the fusible link that's there. What sort of fusible links are out there? From memory, there's sort of glass vials with a liquid inside, or is it? And then there's sort of wax type.
Well, yes. Well,
different melting temperatures.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is typically a residential domestic sprinkler head, which has got this fusible link. But yes, certainly you can have the other type as well, which very often you will see those in sort of commercial environments. Then, if you like, in like your B&Q stores or your hospitals as such. Yeah.
Excellent. And obviously, you know, when the water starts to flow, whilst we're on the subject of the product. The flow switch itself, do you want to explain how that operates?
John? Yep. Well, here's the flow switch, and basically this sits in the pipe, and there's a little paddle in the pipe, which I just quickly move this. I don't know if you can see the paddle, but basically when the water flows, it pushes the paddle forward, which makes the connection for the signal, which goes to then
which can link out to
the
your
alarm
system, for example.
So, simple as that, very, very simple process.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm starting to run out of things to say now, to be honest with you. That's a really good session. Oh, a good start to the session, I should say. And we'll obviously edit this bit out. So, is there anything else you want, before we go on to sort of the other bits that I was going to say about the community and things like that? Is there anything else you guys wanted to add in with?
Happy belated 30th birthday to Aico for last year.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, would have been nice to celebrate it last year, but yeah. What can you do, eh? It's an awkward one.
I mean, it's a testament to your success and your devotion to what's to come, I'm sure. You know, it's
absolutely, yeah. It is a statement of intent, you know. I mean, what you can see behind you know, it's you got Aico with HomeLink and SmartLink, so some of the newer technologies that are coming out. It's you know, we're only moving forward. The company has to move forward, not backwards.
Well, I got to say, I mean, to be invited by Aico and held in such high regard, you know, by yourself, it's quite a compliment to us, being a humble, small family business, yet we've grown significantly. When I'm thinking about the future and the path I want to map out for our team back down in South Wales, this is inspiring to us, you know. It's great to be able to see what RSP might become one day.
Absolutely, yeah.
If we really act on it right. So
I'd like to talk a bit more about third-party accreditation and competence.
Please do, yeah.
Because it's relevant to both our industries, if you like. So I don't know if you want to ask a question about third-party accreditation and
yeah, sure. Well, so
I can just talk, we can edit it in. Or
I'll chuck in a question about third party.
I think Daniel did touch on it, so you could probably edit me in, following on from Daniel. You know?
Oh, there we are. Then, yeah. If you want to chip in, then by all means.
Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit about accreditation and competence. Post Grenfell, obviously, the Dame Judith Hackett reports. There's been a very strong sort of leaning towards competence. And I think our industry generally is beginning to recognise that you just can't rest on your laurels and have your third-party accreditation and think everything is all hunky-dory, if you like. It's something we've come to recognise. You know, are we providing enough training for our installers? So we've been looking at this quite a lot recently, and we are now developing a whole system of training. To us, it's important now that every person in our company is competent for the role that they do. You know, be they an installer, a designer, HR, whatever it is actually. We decided we need competence throughout the organisation. Maybe obvious, but it's not necessarily so obvious in real life. And I've often thought, you know, I listen to these reports on where you've got the public inquiry and there's some poor soul on the stand there being grilled by a lawyer. And it might not be his fault that he overlooked a certain thing with Grenfell, for instance, but it was within the culture of the company he works for. And I don't want any of our employees ever to be exposed in that way. So I'm more inclined now, yes, get your third-party accreditation, but for goodness sake, get evidenced training for every role that you've got, you know?
Couldn't agree more. It's something that we, again, on the fire side, we've been doing for many years now. Aico Expert Installer, so a dedicated training platform, so an hour's worth of CPT, FIA accredited training on standards and regulations, site and installation, obviously all the important bits. It's all well and good being a qualified electrician, of course, you know, that's a given. But, you know, to make sure that that alarm is in the right place, you know, in a corner of the room, it's not going to be efficient. So, and as you've probably seen on some sprinkler installations, these things aren't fitted. I've seen some pictures. I think you, Dan, you've shown me some pictures in the past that are pretty shocking. Not of you or any installations you've done, but you know, it's making sure that that education is pushed down the line so that we're all fitting to make sure. Yeah, third-party accreditation of a product is fantastic, but again, it's only as good as the installation as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that RSP are far from perfect, you know, but we're motivated, making the right investment in the right areas. I mean, as Anthony referred to earlier, we were the first third-party certificated installer in Wales at a time where perhaps we didn't have to be. You know, being that there haven't been many of us, getting through tendering hasn't been too much of a challenge, but we're not motivated just by doing the minimum. You know, we do want to invest in the right way of doing business and the right way of doing installations. And when it comes to quality, yeah, it's continuous improvement is how we always see that. We're always learning, we're always striving to do better. But what we're seeing out in the market at the moment, we did a service of a house not far from us, from where we're based, and the homeowner's been living there for 2 years. It was a new built house, so fell within the legislation. And I said, okay, before we go and do the service, can we see some paperwork? I wasn't given any. Right, okay, because we like to see the paperwork to see what we're measured against, you know, in terms of what the commission looked like against what we're now servicing. So we didn't have any documentation for that. He had a straight connection to the main, which is always a great way of doing the install if the water and flow and pressure is there. That's the fantastic outcome when you can achieve it. So we thought, oh great, okay, so no pump or tank to worry about. And one of my fantastic engineers went out there to do a service, did the flow test, it failed. The pressure and flow were really low, so it should have been a pump and a tank. When they did the visual inspection of the house, there was some heads were missing, they were the wrong type of heads, and all sorts of issues. But that's gone through all manners of diligence, from building control to conveyance solicitors, estate agents. There's been a team of professionals looking after this property, and this guy now is potentially left with a situation where he's got to pay a good couple of £1,000 to put it right. And when I said to him, look, okay, you know, these are our recommendations, but of course, it's really on you, you know, if you want it done. And he said, well, I've got 2 kids in the house.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, well, you know, it's not for me to say that, obviously, you know, it comes off a little tasteless, doesn't it? But it's incredible what work is being done out there that shouldn't be done. And this installer, I think, this installer, from what I could see, knew how to solvent weld the pipe, knew how to set heads, so on the surface looked okay. But there's a fundamental lack of quality management and design knowledge. So
and sense of responsibility.
Yeah, no traceability.
Yeah.
We're saying definitely sprinklers. Get sprinklers in far and wide, but make sure you're choosing the right people and the right products.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Welcome back. It was great to hear from Dan Thomas, John and Anthony Newman at RSP Fire Sprinkler Systems. This is part 1 of a 2-part mini-series, and you know, it was great to hear about their experiences over the last 12 months through COVID and how they've really worked on their relationship with us and how we're all looking forward to the future. Catch up with part 2 on the next episode of Aico TV. But now we're going to go to a short break and we're going to look at our Aico installer community. See you again shortly.
For the next session of Aico TV, we're going to join our Regional Specification Manager for the home counties, Ben Malton, and he's sitting down with Kirsty Hall, the Area Lettings Manager for Signature Estates, and also Ettan, Bazil, who is the founder of the Help Me Fix It app. The group are going to discuss property technology, the Help Me Fix It app, and also breaking down the barriers to the future of smart living.
Okay, so today I'm over in Watford. I'm meeting with Kirsty at Signature Estates, and we're going to be talking about property technology with Ettan Bazil, the founder of Help Me Fix.
Hi, Ben Malton from Aico, Regional Specification Manager for the home counties. Today I've travelled over to Signature Estates here in Watford, and I'm met by Kirsty Hall, the Regional Area Property Lettings Manager, and also Ettan Bazil, founder of Help Me Fix and Managing Director of Elite Plumbing and Heating. We're going to be talking about the use of technology in the private rented sector and how Signature Estates have adopted some new tech to drive resident benefits. So Kirsty, thanks very much for inviting us over. It's great to come down here and nice to see you again, Ettan. Kirsty, please, could you just give us a background on Signature Estates?
Yep, so Signature Estates opened this office in 2012, and then in 2014 we opened another branch in Abbots Langley, and currently we manage over 300 properties. And last year, before we went into lockdown, we also acquired another company which brought on another 45 managed properties. So we are very busy on our management portfolio.
Oh, fantastic. And Ettan, it's been a while since we last met. I think we last spoke when you were dealing with plumbing and heating and driving carbon efficiency into housing stock with upgraded heating systems and such like. Tell us a little bit about Elite Heating and your journey into Help Me Fix.
Yeah, so Elite Heating and Plumbing have been working kind of in the areas of Watford, Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire for the past 5 years. Signature Estates was one of our first business clients. Back in 2016, we started working for them. We primarily work for landlords via letting agents, so that's basically what we do. We specialise in business to business. We specialise in working in rented properties, and a lot of what we hear, obviously, as we've grown, we cover electrical, plumbing, heating, gas, and as we've grown in size, obviously our overhead grew, and one of the major complaints that we had from landlords was that they had to pay a call-out charge to get us to the property. So obviously, it's quite expensive to call out a tradesperson due to the fact that there's very high running costs. The other complaint that we regularly had was that we were too late. So when a job would come in, it would sometimes take a day or two to get to the property. Even if we got there within 24 hours, usually any damage to the property had already been done by water coming through a ceiling, or the tenant had been without hot water for 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever. So I noticed a lot of problems in the private rented sector and set about trying to fix those problems around 2 years ago. And we developed a bit of tech that sits in between engineers, tenants and property managers and acts as a kind of doorway to tackle these problems using video triage and video maintenance.
That's fantastic. And what was the key driver for Signature Estates to adopt this technology, and be an early adopter? Because that's quite innovative, disruptive technology that you brought to the sector. And what was your key driver in Signature to trial this?
So we've obviously worked with Ettan, as he said, for a few years now, so we knew how he worked. It did take a little bit of convincing. But as a company, it came at the right time as we were then rebranding and putting ourselves back out as a rebranded company. So it was like, now we do have to move with the times, which is why we decided to get on board with the Help Me Fix app. And we've had a great response to it.
And what sort of benefits are you starting to realise already?
The benefits are the girls are less busy, so our property managers are here. We've got 2 property managers. Obviously, we've got a very large portfolio of properties, so the girls are always busy dealing with other things. To take that element of maintenance away from them, it just makes a massive difference. But not only for us in the office, but obviously tenants as well. They can control it themselves. And landlords are also seeing a massive difference in their costs each month. For example, I've got a landlord with over 30 properties. His maintenance bill at the end of the month is basically less than half of what it was before with the Help Me Fix app, because the cost is now less because we've wiped out the call-out fees.
Oh, that's fantastic. So what type of call-outs are you typically seeing is most common within the Help Me Fix app?
So originally when I developed it, I had this kind of like amazing rainbow unicorn version of it being able to solve everything. You know, I thought it was going to be great for like handyman stuff and stuff like that, but it's not. Really, Help Me Fix is best used in the core categories. So gas, plumbing, electrical, appliances is a brilliant one. And primarily we're seeing it being used to solve problems like leaks, simple boiler problems, so like low pressure, or where the tenant doesn't really know how to use the controls properly, or if there's no gas, we can triage that, make sure that, you know, if they're doing everything correctly, and just simple things like, has the gas bill been paid? You know, has the gas meter been knocked off? You know, has the boiler gone to lockout? Does the boiler need to be reset? And these kind of issues it's very handy for, but the major, the biggest impact is with water leaks. We've had Help Me Fix calls at 9:30 at night where we've managed to isolate the water within a couple of minutes, where usually a physical engineer would have been dispatched and they might not have got there for an hour and a half. So we've saved a lot of ceilings, and obviously saved a lot of stress for the tenants. We've isolated toilets, we've helped tenants to manage to flush their toilets themselves when they're broken. You know, but yeah, isolating water leaks has been the biggest impact.
I'm interested to learn more about the how this app works and how you've deployed the technology. So it's an app that the resident gets, yeah, and you empower your residents to be able to access that app. The other end of the call, how's that call received and triaged, and a resolution that comes back to the resident, and how do you then report what's going on back to the landlord?
Okay, so at the moment the service is deployed in like an app that's installed on a mobile device. We're currently working on a download-free version of the app, but essentially each tenant has a copy of the app and can access the service via their mobile device. The property managers have a admin panel in the middle and a device as well. The call goes from the tenant, it goes out to the property manager, who then authorises it if they want to authorise the calls. They don't have to, but obviously it's quite handy. Then the call gets authorised, and then it starts to ping every engineer in that category. So every engineer that's live in, let's say, the plumbing category will receive a push notification to say that there's a tenant waiting with an emergency, and it will round robin every engineer until somebody picks up. So if you've got 10 engineers in the plumbing category, it pings every engineer every couple of seconds, then they pick up, it then matches them with the tenant, so the tenant sees the face of the person they're going to speak to, which is really nice in kind of removing barriers, and then they're joined in over video. The engineer device has capability to take photographs throughout the call, and they walk the tenant through resolving the issue or gathering information if it's a more serious issue. And then at the end of the call, there's a job report on the engineer's device, which they fill out, they attach the photos, they click send, and then it goes off to the property manager. If it's out of hours and a physical visit is required, there's an emergency dispatch button that the engineer can press, and if they press that button and press send, it then sends an automatic works instruction to the property manager's contractor and tells them to saddle up and get to the property. It sends a text to the tenant and tells them that the contractor's on the way, gives them the contractor's details. And yeah, so we kind of handle the whole out of hours process. There's no intervention required from any third party. And during working hours, we give the control obviously to the property manager, but they're kind of, they don't initiate the process anymore. The tenant initiates the process, which means that it saves all of those waiting times and it improves service to the tenant.
That's fantastic. So the residents are empowered. How did you get around engaging the residents to change the way that they possibly have been reporting repairs for a period of time and using this technology, embracing this new technology, to have this direct call, if you like, instead of ringing you and saying, I need someone to come out to my property, I've got a problem, to actually dealing with a contractor direct. How did you get around that? Was it much of an issue in engaging those people?
We actually had a better response than we thought we would with tenants, but Ettan had put together an email for both the tenants and the landlords that we'd sent off, explaining the app, how to download the app, how it works, and they did get on really well with it, and we were actually shocked by how well they actually embraced the app.
Was that one of your early sort of thoughts that it might not be
yes, which
big
was one of
take-up?
our concerns, that they would still resort back to our original way of reporting maintenance, and we would come in again to, you know, out of hours maintenance issues. But actually, we haven't had any problems with any of the tenants that have downloaded the app and are using it. They've really taken to it really well, which again makes it easier for us. So it actually just shows how effective it is and how easy it is to use for tenants.
There's a lot that goes on under the hood.
Imagine.
Obviously, you know, we make sure that tenants are at ease. So we have like a series of emails that go out. We've got loads and loads of like support videos. So we've got like a big support section, you know, and we send like, because it's very easy to get an email and then forget. So we send out reminders every now and again, like, hey, you know, you can use the service, it's there for you if you need it to be. And the thing is that we're currently just building a widget that sits on the agent's website so that they can actually connect via the website over video from their desktop. So out of hours, when they come onto the agent's website and they need help, it will be right there. They can just press connect and they'll be connected with an engineer. So everything that we're doing at the moment is about removing barriers so that residents, tenants can use the service with the minimum of fuss. You know, even down to people with language barriers. We've got our team, you know, anyone that can't really speak English, we have like a multilingual team that calls them up and walks them through installing the app. So we really take time to onboard every single tenant onto the service.
No, so you've thought of everything there then, in terms of those sort of barriers to adoption, you know, and that's the key thing, because I think, you know, with Aico products and such like, we have to ensure that those barriers are mitigated right the way through our product range, whether that's deploying fire alarms, making sure people test their alarms and things like that is really important. In terms of compliance, how do you feel that this is going to aid compliance in terms of managing properties and what you used to do as a maintenance contractor? Where do you see this going in the end?
Yeah, I think that obviously this kind of technology in some form is going to play a massive part going forwards, not just in maintenance reporting, but you know, in a post-COVID world as well, where people don't really want strangers in their property unless they can help it. Video will form an integral part of all kind of aspects of lettings and maintenance and these kind of things. You know, you could get a tenant to test their smoke alarms. If you wanted to initiate it the other way around, you could have someone testing their alarms, making sure that everything works, without having to send a contractor to test the alarms for them, which means you could then protect your residents at hardly any cost. And you know, empower the residents to be able to do these things for themselves. They should know how to change the batteries in a smoke alarm. They should know how to change a light bulb. They should know how to do these, how to change a fuse. But you'd be amazed of the knowledge gap, that there's a huge knowledge gap. And it kind of leaves tenants and residents like helpless, so to speak. And part of what we're doing at Help Me Fix is to give the power back and empower tenants to help themselves.
Yeah, precisely. And I think, you know, you mentioned about a post-COVID world, and one of the key things that we have to look at, and a key driver, is the environmental impact. You know, delivering a service where housing providers are trying to make their homes more efficient. For example, they're insulating more, and they're trying to drive efficiency into the building. But we mustn't forget that there's also an impact in managing that property. So deploying vans backwards and forwards around a large housing stock also has quite a significant climate impact.
Yeah.
So I can see that being a benefit as well. In sort of
that's an unspoken benefit that obviously everyone kind of forgets about. There's a massive carbon, you know, implication here where it's carbon neutral. You know, to send someone in a van to a property, you're looking at fuel, you're looking at emissions, and it's very inefficient. And often they go into the property, they say, needs a new tap. Needs a new tap. And this is the type of tap it needs, okay? And that could all be done within about 3 or 4 minutes over video.
And of course, we've got more and more cities now. I don't know about Watford, but certainly around the areas going into London now, other cities, Oxford, Bath, Bristol, they're going into these sort of carbon zones. So how have you found that as getting a man in a van into cities with more congestion charge or low carbon zones?
So we don't go. So we won't go into congestion charge zones, emission charge zones, because what happens is it becomes too prohibitive for the landlord to pay for us to go into those zones. Because if we're just going into to a property, we've got congestion charge, we've got emissions charge, we've got parking charges. It's difficult for us to get there. And obviously, with the traffic and congestion, it can take hours to do a round trip. So we, with this kind of service, it's going to enable, not only does it enable landlords and lettings and property managers to be able to deliver a great service to their tenants, but it allows the contractors to be able to deliver that service as well, because the barriers of all these things are removed.
Absolutely. And for you as a managing agent, finding and keeping hold of good tradesmen that respond to the priorities that your landlord is obligated to do and to provide a good service. How are you finding getting hold of tradesmen these days?
It has been very, very difficult in the past to get a good... What happens is, and it happens in all agencies, you find a contractor, they're brilliant, they sell you the dream, and then they start going downhill. We've always had a consistency with Ettan, which is another reason why we jumped on board the Help Me Fix app as well, because it is hard to find good people and good people that want to work for you as well.
Yeah, and the trades themselves, we've got a skill shortage. We know that it's a massive national skill shortage. I know you as an organisation try and promote from within, and you bring fresh blood in and apprentices and things like that, but that's not the norm. There isn't that many apprentices coming through the system now. We've got an ageing population with tradesmen retiring, and a lot of tradesmen have to retire younger because their knees are shot after doing electrical works or plumbing works for their whole working life. But they've got the knowledge, the skills to be able to deliver this type of work. How are you finding not only the management of those staff and obtaining staff in the industry, but how are you using your existing resources to transition on to sort of a triage?
So our best engineer, hands down, takes the most calls, has the most knowledge, solves the most problems, is retired. He's fantastic. He's got loads and loads of experience. He's coming to the end of his physical career, and this means that you can retire from the physical game at 55. He usually lasts to before the back goes and the knees go and you can't do it anymore, and work for as long as you want. And the idea of Help Me Fix actually came from the person that trained my father, who then trained me, saying, I wish there was a number that people could call to get their water off in an emergency, because I could do that and I could still give over my knowledge. And so there is an implication there. These ageing tradesmen with all this knowledge and experience, they can continue working and offer masses and masses of value without having to get physically involved. In terms of training in apprentices, we try and support and promote from within, but you have to invest a lot of time and a lot of energy into an apprentice, and they will have to want to learn as well. And that's something that obviously we're trying to do on the physical side, and we'll continue to do going forward.
So how scalable do you see this as an application and a service? Signature Estates are a growing portfolio of property. How are you going to sort of match the demand in terms of scaling, not only with Signature and other local letting agents, but larger housing managers and larger housing portfolios are often nationwide, so there's obviously going to be benefits there.
Yeah, so it's nationwide, the service, so obviously a lot of our engineers are up north, and it doesn't matter where the engineers are. It also means that, for instance, Signature Estates could expand their portfolio of managed properties and offer a virtual service, as long as you can find the physical follow-on in a certain area, you can triage maintenance issues from anywhere in the world. So it's completely scalable. It gives Signature Estates an extra reach that they didn't necessarily have before. They can offer services to landlords all over London, all over the country, and say we offer this video triage service that nobody else, well, some do, but that's new, and that is that's an innovative way to manage your properties and save money. So yeah, it's completely scalable.
So go back to one of those barriers that we mentioned earlier on, and the sort of that resident engagement thing. Residents, we talked about the ethnicity. What about those that are possibly technophobes? They haven't got like the mobile phones, or potentially it could be an older demographic, for example. Have you found that as an issue, or are you generally finding that these days everyone's got access to the technology, and perhaps those sort of silver surfers, as we call them in the industry?
We have had a few that have had issues. They don't have the right smartphone, or they use their phone to make calls and texts, and that's it. So that we have broken down a few of those barriers. We've kind of talked them through, things like that. I think you're always going to have those people that are technophobes.
Yeah.
But we can only do the best that we can do in trying to get them on board and download the app, etc., if they've got the right smartphone. But I think in this world, you're always going to have those people that are...
I suppose one of the benefits, though, is that because your property managers in the office here are taking generally less calls from everybody, they can really target and focus and help those people out with probably a better service.
Yeah.
So, it's win-win for those people as well, I suppose.
Yeah, and this is a technical barrier. I mean, this is a barrier that we're already overcome. So we're releasing a Help Me Fix 2 at the moment, which is a purely there's no downloads. So it's a web application, and tenants can access it from any device, including their home PC. We're developing different access points so that rather than having to remember the username and password, the tenant can just send a text to a mobile number saying, "Help, I have a leak." It then returns a link, and they click the link and they're connected to an engineer over video. So all of these barriers that we're encountering are technical barriers, and they can be overcome using AI, using great kind of microservices like Access microservices, and the possibilities are boundless. It's just a case of us developing them, testing them, offering them to tenants, and seeing if they work. Which is why a partner like Signature Estates have been a massive help in kind of helping us to kind of iterate and innovate and make these changes as we go along and release them.
If there's any barriers that we've found, we just feed them straight back to Ettan, and he just jumps straight on it and creates something else.
So has the service, you say, started off as a sort of a gas triage and electrical, and now you've moved into appliances, you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so the best categories, the core categories are gas, plumbing, heating, electrical, drainage, and appliances, really. And appliances is a great one because most issues with appliances are maintenance related. So I know myself from having problems with my washing machine at home, usually, and my fridge, that usually it's a filter that's blocked, or a fan is blocked, or something's blocked usually, or something needs emptying. So a lot of those issues can be solved by the tenant just with the right supervision. It's all about the expert supervision on the other end of the phone, and speaking to someone as well just calms you down straight away.
Yeah,
if you've
it's
got
a fear, isn't it? If they've got the fear of touching something that isn't theirs, they might break it and then cause more problems. But if you've actually got someone talking you through it that knows what they're doing, it's like learning anything, isn't it? It's an instruction manual to anything when you've got someone on the other end of the phone. It just makes it that much easier.
So where next with Help Me Fix? Where do you see, and what other innovations do you think that complement that?
Well, so Help Me Fix is very much like under the microscope at the moment. We've got companies like FixFlow talking to us about integrating with them. Companies like Techlet, all of these kind of companies that provide services to agents you know, they want to utilise the Help Me Fix technology to be able to offer it to their tenants and their clients. So we're in talks with integrating with a number of different companies. Like I said, we're making the service download free, so that's going to be a massive boost. And essentially, we will develop and follow the path that's laid out for us by our clients. So if our clients say this is what would be good and this is what we'd like, then that will go into our development roadmap. It's a service for agents and landlords, and essentially, you know, agents and landlords will lead the development roadmap for us.
And you as a managing agent, when you start to tell your landlords that in fact what you're doing is you're passing over the repairs and maintenance responsibility to a third party. You know, you're empowering another organisation to make decisions, albeit that you have authorisation. How are your landlords finding that as a...
When I go out and I value a property and they're looking at a managed, I always tell them about the Help Me Fix app, and they are always very positive. They have questions, and well, I'm paying you a management fee, so why are you handing it over to somebody else?
Yeah.
But actually, once I get into the depth of, well, we do have still the power over it, they're fine. And then I use the examples of the no call outs, the lower charges on maintenance. I use the example of, you know, the lower boiler pressure. Tenants are ringing up, what would have cost a £70 call out fee for a plumber to go out and fix it. Actually, it's now going to cost you £10. It's a no-brainer. It doesn't.
The proof of the
there's
pudding
no
is,
barriers there. Then that they kind of lose the barriers, and they buy into it. They do buy into it. So it's all been very positive. Very positive.
That's brilliant.
Right.
Okay, so we'll stop there.
Thank you.
Let's have a drink. I think that went really good. Good about you.
Smashing. Right, best I've ever had.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Signature Estate's going to be all over the internet in about 5 hours, I'd say.
So you can see how you could use this as a driver for how you're innovating in the sector.
Definitely.
You know, because we're talking to the likes of the regulators in terms of, is it Arla and people like that?
Yeah.
So, you know, when I say Aico go big in terms of if they get their bee into a bonnet, you know, we're talking to central government. We've got, do you know, the woman that's running the Grenfell inquiry, Dame Judith Hackett.
Right.
Okay, she sits on our panel for most of our events. You saw that event that we hosted about 6 months ago when we said that we're going to launch into the IoT business for housing. We had 2 guest speakers on our live event. We had Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web.
Wow.
Yeah, and Steve Wozniak, the co-founder with Steve Jobs of Apple.
Yeah.
Talking about Aico going into the connected home. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
IoT stuff's amazing. Do you know about the IoT stuff?
No.
So for instance, Aico are partnered up with HomeLink. Or did you buy HomeLink?
We bought HomeLink.
Right, so they acquired HomeLink, and HomeLink build sensors in properties. So
Well, we build the sensors. They build
you
the
build
AR.
the-
They build the insights and the dashboard that then a landlord has access to see how a house is performing.
So
Right,
like,
okay.
so say for instance, if you've got a humidity sensor,
Yeah.
let's say, it can detect heightened like moisture in the air, which was obviously a sign of either a leak or poor ventilation. You've got ones connected to the boiler that can do all kinds of stuff as well. So you can essentially see like the health of the property on like a dashboard. It's crazy stuff, and like I'm really interested in it.
Yeah, and the app that we've now produced, which will be going live in about a fortnight's time, the end resident gets like a Fitbit for their home.
Oh, okay.
In terms of the app. And so, for example, the heightened humidity scenario, it might prompt, the idea is to mitigate a potential, what we call a legal disrepair claim to the landlord, which is massive.
Yeah.
So if a resident doesn't respond to things like ventilating their property, or they take the fuse out of the fan because they think it's costing them money,
Yeah,
or
which they
things like
do.
this. Yeah, which we know. If they have an app that says the property is at risk of heightened humidity, we suggest you open a window. If they don't do that, ignore it. At least the landlord has prompted them to
Tried,
to make an inquiry and to remedy it.
Yeah.
And if it's ongoing, they can see, well, actually that property is going down that route of a potential disrepair claim. So they can make an early intervention before it gets to a claim. So the app is there to drive and empower residents, basically.
I feel an integration coming on. I'm not going to lie, Ben. I feel a step 2 coming on.
So let's talk about, what should we talk about next? We'll do another session, and then do you guys fancy some lunch?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. How long have you got, Kirsty?
I'm here till 2:30 today.
Okay.
I'm a school run mum today.
Okay, so we'll do 10 minutes, and we are going to bash expert installer. How you came on as expert installer, yeah, and how AI technology and empowering residents and providing knowledge to landlords through insights would be useful.
Yeah, I to be honest, you know that I'm a massive.
Yeah, and I think what that does is that joins up property managers. It's all about knowledge for you, isn't it? Not how do you see? So you get a portal with Help Me Fix.
Yeah. So there's a client portal.
So do you log into that on a daily basis?
Personally, I don't.
No, well, we find this with our major landlords. They're rolling this out. I've got Barnet Council putting probably 800 of these in a month.
The girls might, but I don't.
I manage it.
Oh, okay.
I manage it, and so at the moment, I'm managing the.
Am I good to use my desk now?
Yeah, go for it.
Cheers. Thank you.
I'm managing the admin pack. So I'm doing the move-ins and move-outs and everything for Signature Estates, because just to remove barriers from this end. But coming next is essentially the revamp of the client area means that they can send a magic link to a tenant through the portal. So if a tenant comes in via the phone, they can say, "Oh, hold on," press the button, and it sends the magic link to the tenant. And the
so let's talk about that then. Okay, so we'll do a take on the next stages and how AI sensors might integrate and give more knowledge for you, more insights for you, and help, or give the homes a voice or something like that. Do you know what I mean?
This is great stuff anyway.
Okay, so the next
just caught me into all this tech and I don't know what to do now.
Right, we're going to do the next step, cutting boys. So, Ettan, so we're talking now of properties that we've got empowered and engaged residents using technology to notify you as an application provider and a support service to the letting agents and the managing agents. How do you think this can develop in terms of, even further of engaging residents and deploying and keeping properties compliant?
So I think that there's a massive shift happening in the private rented sector that's already happening in the social housing sector. The use of kind of IoT within properties is going to change the game going forwards. Massive advocate for IoT, sensor technology, fuel poverty, monitoring these kind of things that are happening and connecting tenants with their homes. They live in these properties, so empowering them with the knowledge to be able to improve their living environment, and to connect them to the right person at the right time is all very important. I see kind of emerging between IoT and video technology to be able to create a really efficient and great user experience for tenants and residents going forwards. I know that kind of Aico have developed with HomeLink this amazing kind of sensor technology, and are installing these everywhere, and I do see a merging of the two sides.
Yeah, and we often get the feedback that we often know of a problem in people's homes before they know it themselves. The sensors that are out there now can preempt problems before they even exist, and you as a managing agent, you must be seeing things like a rise in complaints in terms of condensation, damp, mould, people not ventilating their properties correctly, people removing smoke alarms and batteries you mentioned to me earlier. So how can you see this all sort of tying up, and and coming back to if you like, a dashboard, giving your homes a voice so that you know exactly what's going on, probably before the resident realises that there's an issue rising in their property.
Yeah, I mean, so if there was a kind of alert system that could alert the managing agent to a problem, so say for instance there was an alert system that could say that there was a high humidity level inside the property, and that was flagged up to the agent could then essentially use the Help Me Fix admin panel to send a video link to the tenant so that they could connect to the specialist and see exactly where the problem was and have a look around the property. So you've then prevented a problem from even happening in the first place. So at the moment, software like Help Me Fix is responsive, so when a problem happens, the tenant uses the service. If you're using it in combination with IoT and kind of a dashboard for the managing agent, you've then got to the problem before it's even happened. And that could be a game changer for landlords and also for tenants, and in terms of like potential habitation claims and disrepair claims and things like that, it could eliminate a lot of that kind of heartache really for everyone involved.
Yeah, and it's a rising problem. We've got fitness for human habitation, as you referred to there, unlimited claims. We've got ambulance chasers out there promoting on social media and actually canvassing residents, no win, no fee to make a claim against condensation, damp and mould. So it could help eliminate a lot of those problems, couldn't it?
I think so. I think a good combination of, especially keeping the tenant in the forefront of mind as well is very important. Because if you help the tenant and give improved service to the tenant, who essentially is the customer of the landlord, you're gonna improve service to the landlord by default. And then in terms, you're going to make everything a lot less stressful for everyone involved, for managing agents, the landlords, the tenants. And merging with these new technologies, the release of, a combination of sensor technology, AI, video triage, all of these technologies that are kind of working separately at the moment in their own spaces, once they become combined, then you've got a whole new type of solution, and you're really kind of throwing things back to the tenant and empowering them to make the right decisions.
Perfect.
So thank you to Kirsty and Ettan, and of course Ben, for that interesting discussion on property technology and where it may be heading in the future and how we're going to overcome those barriers. Right now we're going to go to another advert, this time looking at our EcoFit range.
Next, we're going to hear from our Regional Specification Manager, Steve Bully. He's going to be sitting down with our National Technical Manager, Andy Speak, and Phil Murphy, who is a HRRB Fire Safety Manager. Phil Murphy is a practical and principled fire safety management advisor who gives advice to high-rise residential building owners, managers and landlords. So let's take a look at what the guys had to say and what conversations took place and everything that Phil gets up to.
Hi, you're watching Aico TV. My name's Steve Bully. I'm the Regional Specification Manager for Aico in the southwest of England. Joined today by my colleague Andy Speak, National Technical Manager for Aico, and we've got a special guest in the studio today, Phil Murphy of Manchester Sustainable Communities. Phil is one of the more respected kind of voices on LinkedIn around high-rise fire safety. So it's been great to get you up today, Phil. Just tell us a bit about what you do.
Most of my time is spent talking to owners and managers of high-rise residential buildings about their fire safety management, and I'm involved in a long-term research project on that subject with Leeds University as well.
Right, okay. What's your kind of background?
My first job in fire safety was about 35 years ago when I was a soldier on a firefighting vehicle, believe it or not, and then I left the army a few years after that and joined Greater Manchester Fire Service. At the time when it was really at its peak in terms of how busy it was at the turn of the century, I was at a place called Mosside Fire Station, which was one of the busiest fire stations in Europe and was completely surrounded by high-rise flats. I then studied fire engineering and fire safety officer, so I went into the enforcement side before leaving the brigade to advise owners of tall and complex buildings on their fire safety management. And a few years ago I went self-employed and started to specialise in residential buildings.
Right. I mean, we do a lot with high rises. Probably a good point to bring Andy, and not so much in the southwest of England, but in
no, you don't have as many down there, do you?
Lots of fields and sea and things like that.
Caravans.
Yeah, Andy obviously works nationally, so in the big cities, done a lot with different RSMs around the country. So I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on that side of things?
It's great to have people with the expertise that you have doing that, because what we witness is it varies massively from one city to another, let alone from one building to another. From low rise to high rise, there is a lot of discrepancy between what different people are specifying, what different solutions they're applying. And then it's been a rapidly changing market as well recently. We've had new standards released and evacuation, haven't we? 8629, new passes released. So it's ever changing. From our side, it's a lot easier. We're just domestic. So the moment you go outside of that property, where the complication starts and the different solutions, that's where we kind of say, well, that's not our area of expertise. And it's nice and simple inside the dwellings. But what are you seeing at the moment? Do you work nationally, or you've
all over the country? I mean, the sands are shifting, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, it's very fluid at the moment, and people are being understandably cautious, I think.
Yeah.
And there's a sense that things might be changing direction insofar as residential buildings might start to be regarded more similarly as buildings with people in remote locations with a single exit route, which is a considerable shift. But I think that might be underway. You know, that might be what we're seeing at the moment. Some of the changes have been slow to arrive. But then we're still learning a lot about what happened on that tragic day on June 14th in 2017. So I think as we hear more about what's happened there, then it puts us in a better place to be able to avoid anything like that.
It does. We've had a lot of people initially contact us trying to use, and we've still seen it, temporary solutions using domestic alarms in settings where you wouldn't normally see a domestic alarm, but it's a fire engineered solution, it's a temporary solution. So the moment we're like, hang on, are you sure you know what you're doing here? When we actually understand that actually this person doesn't know what they're talking about, and understand it, we're okay. But yeah, there is a lot of different ways that people are taking approaches. Certainly with buildings where there is either cladding or fire doors or compartmentation issues or anything like that, that's where we're seeing these more temporary systems and bespoke systems. Are you seeing that as well, or are you advising that type of solution?
Partially the changes come about because people aren't so quick to assume now that the most important fire safety feature in a lot of these buildings is compartmentation. And people are less quick to assume that it's absolutely 100%.
Yes.
Alongside emerging evidence over the years that the gases that come along with fire, not just the smoke that we can see, but the invisible gases like hydrogen cyanide, carbon monoxide, all of the people that died in Caerphilly died from carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's a gas that you can't see. So that assumption that you're safe in a place in a building because you can't see smoke has got holes in it now. A lot of people in the sector, I think, always suspected that was the case. Some people more than others, but now there's strong evidence there now that when the fire starts in an apartment, that the people in the nearby apartments are at risk, particularly when the front door's opened and their escape route becomes problematic.
Compromised,
particulates in smoke stop you from seeing, and the gases stop you from breathing, and that's your survivability. It depends on you being able to see, it depends on you being able to breathe.
And we've talked around, me and yourself, on some of the work that you've been doing with the university with regards to times. You know, you get past a certain threshold and
things get a lot more serious very quickly.
Yeah, we've known for a long time. The Department for Communities Local Government did some great work in 2012, looking at the fatalities that fire services face in special service calls and in fires. And the work that they did showed a stark difference in outcomes, which is kind of centred around the 20-minute mark, where the survivability becomes less likely than a fatality for somebody that's in a fire. And of course, if you live in an urban area with a 7.5-minute attendance time, response time for the local fire service, there's a good possibility that if you're in a place that's safe from the fire, what's trapped in the building, that you'll get out. However, if you're in a high-rise building, as was revealed in a report that a guy called Steve Seamer did. Steve was the Chief Fire Officer at Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service, where they had a catastrophic fire there and lost a couple of firefighters. And they did some tests and found that from the point of arriving at a high-rise fire, if you've got a fire in a flat high up in the building, it's going to take about 20 minutes to set up after arrival.
Right.
So we're talking about 27.5 minutes there. So any survivability likelihood has gone by that time.
Yeah, that's reduced if anything really is left at that.
I think this is coming to light now in the debate about what defines a higher risk in a high-rise building.
Yeah.
And height is relevant to that. You know, we seem to have kind of lost sight of the fact that when you're risk assessing a high-rise premises, it's the people within the building, it's the risk to them that you're assessing. You're not just walking around the premises and seeing if a fire might start or if a fire might spread. You've got to look at the occupants within that building and assess the risk from that to them. And of course, with growing fire, you've got growing hazard. And the likelihoods of the outcomes worsen as the fire grows, particularly in those early stages.
Absolutely, and every building is different as well, so the characteristics of a fire might spread or what smoke control may or may not be present in there. It is quite an in-depth topic, isn't it? So we see more sprinklers going into high-rise buildings. What's your experience on sprinklers at the moment?
I'm reading about a lot more sprinklers going in, en masse as well. Groups of buildings or whole landlord portfolios are getting sprinklers fitted, sometimes with assistance from the fire services, financial assistance, which is great. But being perfectly frank, I think it's high time that residential buildings, obviously subject to a risk assessment, but we've got buildings out there that are 50 years old with 50-year-old fire safety and single escape stair. They're an ideal candidate for it, really. They're not the panacea. They don't in themselves offer a full blanket solution, but they are certainly a big step forward, and they'll stop multiple deaths taking place in high-rise fires.
Yeah, absolutely. We not our area, but we're finding ourselves liaising with sprinkler and misting systems, maybe to a lesser degree, but for misting systems as well, more and more and more. We've got a new British standard 95.1, the new version of that's due out any time. So from the draft I've seen, that looks to be pushing more in the same way, really. So agreed. Yeah, I think that's the way it's going. More and more sprinklers, more and more misting systems where sprinklers aren't appropriate. Wales is already doing it on all new build residential. So that's very much out there in the forefront. I know Scotland's following suit, and as always the case, we're trailing behind here in England, but it's the right way. I'm glad you're seeing the same, really.
How are you finding things with regards to new build high-rises? Is it are the lessons being learned, or is it?
I'm still worried by the fact that we're still building 50-storey tall residential buildings with a single staircase. That is a concern to the Royal Institute of British Architects, and I think instinctively most of us would look and say, isn't that in itself pushing our luck a bit too far? The security arrangements cannot be guaranteed for that building, and there's a fair number of arson cases in common areas in blocks of flats. And when you've only got that one common escape route, that's a huge issue. And it opens up a different category of risk, really, when you've got the potential of that many people being trapped in a building.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see British architects more vocally. Voice communication systems as well are a sensible accompaniment when you've got more than one staircase, so that the fire service on the scene of a fire can communicate with the people within the building and let them know which staircase they're using for firefighting and which one is a safe staircase for people to leave whenever they choose to leave. I do think there's a growing acknowledgement now that trying to tell people to stay in a building where there's a fire elsewhere isn't as straightforward as perhaps we've assumed in the past. It can be quite a terrifying experience, and people are likely to try and leave anyway. All the research that we've seen, even by the likes of the BRE, suggests that about 60% of people, if not more, that was before Grenfell, were evacuating the building. I've got a list now of dozens of evacuations that have taken place without any adverse effects. Providing the staircase remains protected, then it's safe for people to use when they want to.
Do you feel a consensus starting to come nationally on evacuation?
I do, yeah. As we know, there's been a judicial review on the situation now. The government are going to consult on it again. I do think, well, I know that fire services have changed their procedures now. Their emphasis is very much now on protecting the stairwell, using new equipment such as smoke curtains and some not so new equipment such as portable ventilation fans to make sure that an exit stairway stays as full with fresh air. I think we might see increased use of positive pressure ventilation built in to new buildings, and certainly the matter of people that can't self-evacuate. I'm not just talking about people in wheelchairs here. I mean, if you're living high up in a building and you break your leg, you've got a problem. You know, really, you need to think.
It peeps at the moment. It's an ongoing hot topic, isn't it? Personal evacuation plans and how they can be managed, how they should look, and yeah, how that's implemented ongoing. Really, that's another hot topic. You see the same, I assume. Yeah.
I think we'll see a wholesale raising of competence levels across the industry. I think people in your sector have got to step up and start showing people that you can put systems in high-rise buildings that aren't going to proverbially mobilise the fire service and evacuate the building as a whole every time somebody burns a piece of toast. We know that that isn't happening now, but I do think that it needs to be seen to be handled better now by the technology that's available. I think that will give people the confidence. And on the risk assessment side and the strategic side, I think people need to up their knowledge on evacuations. I'm frankly fed up hearing about mass evacuations. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in residential buildings at all, and there's not a scrap of research to suggest that it does. But the research does tell us that people take much longer to decide when they're going to evacuate. And when you think about the fact that everybody that lives in flats is being told now, we want you to feel safe, we want you to feel safe. That's your explanation why people don't immediately evacuate a building. To some extent, some people will be in the shower, some people will be cooking, you know, but we do know that people take longer to decide to evacuate, and that's no bad thing, because that makes for a very manageable evacuation, providing that the staircase remains protected, which, if you've got a fire in an apartment, it should.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting, to hear your kind of take on it all, 'cause obviously this is a lot of it's out of our kind of area of expertise, really, but you're absolutely right with the technology within the alarms, within the properties themselves, educating people to know that, if you say burning your toast, for a start, putting the right alarms in so that they're less likely to trigger from burning your toast, but not only that, but knowing that they're only going to interconnect within that property. That if you hear an alarm going off, it's probably in your own property and you should do something about it. Education, I think, absolutely key, so that's something we're
but you've got two single escape conditions in a high-rise building, usually, if you haven't got a balcony. You know, compare it to a house. You've got a front door, a back door, at least two windows downstairs, and probably at least two windows upstairs, all of which you can escape from. You know, we need to pay more attention as well to how we can improve the survivability of people inside apartments when fires happens. You guys are all over that now. I do think the market with regards to residential tall buildings stagnated a little bit for a few years because there did not appear to be any need to develop it to a great extent. But I do think in the last few years the market has really shot up. It's standing up to the challenge. And I think that the secondary element of the single escape condition in terms of the whole building, I do think that in the fullness of time that will be included in a plan.
Yeah.
You know, people want a plan, and that's very much what Martin Morbick outlined in the recommendations at the end of phase 1, was that landlords and building managers need to make a plan. That doesn't mean they need to be there. You know, if there's 300 people in a building, those 300 people can get each other and themselves out of the building if there's a plan to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really good point, Phil, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Andy, but I know that you spend a lot of time, and sort of going on Phil's things about it kind of moved away, but I know you spend a lot of time in places like London and the big cities, working with councils around high rises.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a hot topic. There's a lot of lot going on. It's rapidly changing. There isn't enough expertise out there. There's a little bit of worry, a little bit of panic. We've seen all the rest of it. So yeah, it's great to have people like yourself, ongoing research, you know, educating, showing the right way of doing things. We are seeing a change. Again, coming back to our own field, we're seeing a change in just alarm installation. So LD3 used to be the standard, just alarms and escape routes. Now LD2 is a recommended standard in the British standard, promoting kitchens and living rooms. I suspect it's not just a suspicion, it's the way that the standards are going. It's going to be LD1. So I would say probably the next time in the British standards for your high-rise at least. But we're already seeing it in sheltered accommodation. And it's just even if you've got detection, audibility throughout the property, it makes obvious sense. So we're seeing it in our market as well. It is the obvious way to go. So yeah, it's been
I think it's probably inevitable. You know, I mean, I don't think we've always been aware of the number of times that buildings are misbehaving. I've got a list of about 50 examples of purpose-built blocks of flats seeing catastrophic fire safety failures. In one instance, even leading to the demolition, is that right?
Yeah.
In one instance, leading to the demolition of the entire building because they couldn't extinguish it. That was in Manchester. They tried for 6 days to extinguish the fire. It was about a 5-storey block of flats. We've got problems with the way that buildings are built now, or have been since the last 10 or 15 years. They present some difficulties with firefighting. We've got problems that have emerged in the last few years with refurbished buildings that we still haven't quite got our heads around yet, I don't think, entirely. We've got problems with aged buildings. And all of these, if we don't learn about these as part of managing fire safety in these buildings, then we're leaving ourselves vulnerable. And I think that, again, it's part of the whole competence uplift that needs to take place across the fire safety sector. It makes people nervous. Change does. But I think that one thing that most people were able to agree on is that we do need to change. And I think the technology available for people that live in high-rise residential buildings now is the key to keeping them safe.
Yeah, that leads me on to my next question. I was going to say, we're not just ourselves, industries, every industry is seeing more focus on IoT. We're no different. It's a massive area, and we're very much customer driven. This is what our customers are asking for, but we're doing remote notification. We're sending information to the cloud. I know obviously through Dame Judith, there's the golden thread of this digital record, which is making its way through BIM and all sorts of building design now as well. Are you seeing again that IoT coming more and more into this, playing a part in the future?
Definitely, and I do think we're just at the start of this, really, now. I think for the next 10 years, as you see owners and housing providers needing to deploy ranges of solutions through ranges of buildings, I think that flexibility and the options that are available they'll get us through some of the challenges that we're facing at the moment. But we do need to put our trust in the research and development to some extent. I do think that needs some investment after perhaps having lacked it for some time, but it's certainly now there. It's improving at speed. You know, I think you guys will acknowledge that the rate at which things are coming onto the market now is almost unforeseen.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that's going to stop. I do think that we'll see demands from the consumers going through the development phase, going to the owners of buildings, going to the managers of buildings, and to some extent that too will drive a more flexible and more varied market of the technologies that are available to protect people.
I think it has to. Historically, the fire industry has always been quite reserved at adopting new technology. It's safety, absolutely, and safety is paramount, and that's not going to change. But you see, in comparison to, say, the security industry, which is a lot different, it's technology's embraced a lot quicker there. IT is worlds apart, and they're updating their standards constantly. So I think that's something that the fire industry we need to do. I think it needs to get faster at adopting new technologies. A conversation with somebody the other day, and we're likening it to the automobile industry as well. They're embracing, that's heavily health, safety driven, but equally is adopting new technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and these are things that we need to do, and I think the fire industry just needs to speed up at embracing this, because I think there's a lot to be gained out of it. I generally do. I
think the potential's massive. Yeah. Genuinely, I think the potential is absolutely massive. For healthcare, you mentioned health.
Yeah.
You know the monitoring of, I mean, how many people die from the cold each year? You know, is the most obvious one. But then in addition to that, for example, in Kent Fire and Rescue Service, they've had stairway protection teams for the last 10 years operating in high-rise buildings, and they carry gas detectors. Now it's only a matter of time before a smoke detector, or what looks like a smoke detector in a stairwell, will be detecting volatile organic compounds, such as hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide. Now that makes life easy for everybody, because it tells the fire officer at the panel that the stairway is clear, so that he can use the evacuation system if he wants. Yeah. Because we're coming up with fragments of a solution that don't quite fit together yet, but they are starting to fit together.
And it's again kind of goes back to the Fitness for Human Habitation Act, doesn't it? Everything's kind of feeding into that around, like you said, too hot, too cold.
Yep.
How many people are dying of that each year? And the IoT solutions
does, yeah, again, it's not, you're right to say exactly, whereas fire industry is looking at smoke or heat, this is looking at other elements, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, temperature, you mentioned VOCs, there's internal air quality. The moment you start getting sources from different alarms, different sensors, monitors around a building, around a property, a dwelling, a flat, yeah, you're getting the health and well-being of the person, but you're also getting a better insight into any potential fires or any potential dangers. It's a crazy new world we're moving into. So yeah,
it's a good example really of one of those things that we have been slow to react to.
Yeah.
Is what the contents of our homes are made of. You know, a fire in a home now will spread a lot quicker. It will burn more ferociously, and it will give off a whole cocktail of toxic chemicals. And whilst we've known that, it's kind of been in the back of our minds. But I do think that now people in buildings are saying, look, you know, this is the situation, and you haven't changed.
Yeah.
And we need to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that brings us to the end of this episode on Aico TV. So thanks for tuning in. I'd like to thank Phil for coming down today. He's really worth giving him a follow on LinkedIn. Like I say, very much one of the more informed people on LinkedIn, and he's posting a lot of really interesting content. Thanks to Andy as well, the National Technical Manager here at Aico. Any more info that you need, then please get in touch with your local specification manager. All details available on the website. Thank you.
It was really great to hear from Phil Murphy there, talking to Steve Bully and Andy Speak. Phil's a really interesting guy. Really great to hear some of his experiences in the fire industry and how his career has developed over the last few years. But now we're going to move on to the next and final section of Aico TV. So I'm going to pass you over to Holly.
So as always, we're going to round up the episode with an FAQ. So once again, it's going to be delivered by our technical advisor, Dave Jennings, there really is no one better to deliver our FAQs. Dave is one of our longest standing colleagues. He's been here for over 20 years and literally knows everything there is to know about Aico products. So this week, he's going to be telling us about how to reset an EI 407 manual call point. Enjoy.
At some point, you may need to factory reset a manual call point. So what you need to do first would be the following. Make sure all the alarms are off the bases. Get the spare key, push it up towards the top. The flag will then drop. Remove the bracket. Undo the 2 screws. Switch the battery to the off position for 5 seconds. Switch the battery back on. Press and hold the house code button till the red light comes on. When it starts to flash, remove the house code. The call point is now back into factory reset.
Thanks to our long-serving team member Dave Jennings there, delivering a really great FAQ that we hope you all enjoyed. But that's all we've got time for on this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Please tune in to the latest future episodes and the latest episodes on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And also you can follow us on social media, Holly.
For the 20th time, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok.
Yes, TikTok. TikTok is a big thing at the moment and we have created a TikTok channel where Holly is the main star.
I'm on there as well.
She's on there as well. Holly is everywhere. So yeah, that's all we've got time for this week and we hope to see you again soon.
Bye.